The Great Hall of Stonehaven was a monument to power and fear. Massive obsidian pillars rose to a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, and the air tasted of cold stone and dying embers from the twin fire pits. It was the heart of the Lycan Kingdom, and today it held its weekly court of petitions. Among the shivering crowd of merchants and farmers stood a ghost. Her name was Alara. To call her thin would be a kindness. She was a wisp of a girl, 17 winters old, draped in a faded gray dress 2 sizes too large. It hung on her like a shroud. Her legs trembled violently beneath the worn fabric, a battle against sheer exhaustion she was rapidly losing. It had been 3 days since her last meal, a crust of stale bread her cousin had tossed into the cellar as one might feed a stray dog. Punishment for speaking without permission. The cellar, that cold, damp hole, was more her home than the cramped attic room. She shifted slightly, and a sharp, sickening pain lanced through her side. A reminder of last night's lesson. A cracked rib, perhaps 2. The bruises on her arms and back throbbed in a symphony of old and new agonies. But she could not show it. Weakness was an invitation for more pain, both here and back in that house of horrors. She clutched a single frayed piece of parchment in her ice-cold hands, the deed to a small abandoned vineyard left by her deceased parents, her inheritance, her only ticket to freedom. If she could just reach the king, if she could just have one moment to speak. The stories said King Calen Blackwood was brutal but just, that his wrath was terrible but so was his protection of the vulnerable. She had to believe that. It was the final desperate ember of hope in a world that had been nothing but cold darkness for 2 long years. The line inched forward. Each step was a mountain to climb. The man before her, a burly farmer complaining about wolf packs, seemed to drone on forever. Ilara's vision began to swim. Black spots bloomed at the edges of her sight, dancing and swirling. The roaring firelight blurred into streaks of gold. The deep, resonant voice of the king answering petitions sounded like it was coming from the end of a long, watery tunnel. No, not now. Please, by the goddess, not now. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing a deep breath that sent fire through her ribs. Just a little longer. Hold on. Just until your name is called. But her body, pushed far beyond any reasonable limit, had made its decision. The world tilted on its axis. The stone floor rushed up to meet her. The last thing she heard was a gasp from the crowd. And then, nothing. King Calen Blackwood was bored. A trade dispute about wool tariffs was sucking the life from the room. His gaze, the color of a stormy sky, drifted over the petitioners. And then he saw her. A pale, fragile thing at the back, swaying like a sapling in a gale. He noted the unnatural stillness of her posture, the way she held her left arm tight against her body. A predator's instinct, honed over centuries of Lycan leadership, flared to life. Something was terribly wrong. He was moving before her knees fully buckled. To the human petitioners, it was a blur, a shadow detaching from the throne and crossing the vast hall in the blink of an eye. He caught her mere inches from the unforgiving stone, his arms closing around a form so slight he feared he might break her by accident. She was weightless, a bundle of bones and threadbare wool. "Healer, now!" His voice, usually a controlled baritone, cracked through the hall like thunder, silencing all whispers. But his attention was already consumed by the girl in his arms. Up close, the damage was stark. Gaunt cheeks, hollowed under eyes so dark they looked like bruises themselves. Lips pale and cracked. And then, as he adjusted his grip to lift her, the sleeve of her dress slid back. Time stopped. Kalen's breath hitched in his chest. His vision sharpened, the human blue of his eyes flickering to the molten silver of his wolf. A low, visceral growl began deep in his chest, a sound that made the nearest guards take a step back. Bruises. Not the accidental kind from a fall. These were deliberate, the unmistakable, lurid, purple-black imprint of fingers encircling her slender wrist. And beneath them, older marks in sickly yellows and greens, a map of long-term suffering. But it was the other marks that made the growl erupt fully. Small, circular scars. Precise. Cigarette burns. Someone had used her flesh as an ashtray. Rage, pure and undiluted, flooded Kalen's veins. His wolf howled inside his mind, a cacophony of fury, demanding blood, demanding vengeance. The temperature in the great hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Who," he snarled, the word barely human, "is she?" The royal healer, an elderly but sharp-eyed woman named Anya, worked with swift, sure hands in the quiet sanctuary of her chambers. King Kalen stood like a statue of wrath by the window, his back to the room, but every sense was tuned to the bed behind him. He had carried her here himself, dismissing all aids. The girl, Anya had found a name, Ilara Vance, lay unconscious, looking even smaller against the white linens. "Tell me," Kalen commanded, his voice gravelly. Anya's tone was clinical, but laced with a deep, cold anger. Malnutrition, severe dehydration, evidence of repeated physical trauma over an extended period. These burns on her forearms are old, but the bruises? Some are hours old, Your Majesty. The fracture here on her ribcage is recent. This was not a single incident. This is a pattern, a campaign. Kalen's knuckles were white where he gripped the windowsill. Who has been guarding her? Who is her family? A quiet knock. His guard, Rylan, entered. "Sire, Ilara Vance, orphan. Parents died in a river ferry accident 2 years past. She was taken in by her closest living relative, her cousin, Magnus Vance, a merchant in the lower city, deals in spices and textiles." "Bring him," Kalen said, the words dripping with icy promise. "Bring him to the interrogation block, in silver chains." "Sire, without proof of his direct involvement," Kalen turned. His eyes were fully silver now, glowing in the dim room. "Look at her, Rylan. That is all the proof I need. The wolf knows. It smells the truth of this. He will answer to me." As Rylan hurried out, Anya spoke softly, finishing her bandaging. "She may sleep for a day, perhaps more. The body shuts down to heal. But the mind? The scars there will be deeper and slower to mend." Kalen finally approached the bed. He looked down at Ilara's peaceful, haunted face. The fury was still there, a burning coal in his gut, but beneath it, something else stirred, a profound, unsettling need to shield. His wolf, usually a voice of aggression, was quiet for a moment, then emitted a low, continuous whine of protection. "Mine to protect," the instinct whispered. He dismissed the thought. It was the rage talking, wasn't it? The dungeons beneath Stonehaven were not the wet, filthy pits of storybooks. They were clean, cold, and utterly secure. In a special cell lined with faintly gleaming silver ore, a metal that neutralized the lichen's ability to shift and slowed their healing, Magnus Vance sat. He was a man of average build, with shrewd, calculating eyes that currently blazed with indignation. "This is an outrage. I am a loyal subject. I demand to speak to the king's council." The cell door opened. Kalen did not enter. He filled the doorway, a silhouette of contained violence. He let the silence stretch, let Magnus feel the weight of the gaze upon him. "Your ward lies broken in my healer's chambers, Vance." Magnus scoffed. "The girl? She is clumsy, a liar, always has been. Falls downstairs, burns herself on the hearth, a drain on my resources. But I, in my charity, kept her fed and clothed." Kalen took one slow step into the room. Healer Anya disagrees. She sees a pattern. Fingers, fists, boots, cigarettes. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. My wolf smells the fear on you, Magnus, the sour stench of guilt. It wants to taste your fear. I am holding it back by a thread. For the first time, Magnus's confidence cracked. He saw the silver glow, heard the subtle growl underpinning the king's words. I disciplined her, as is my right. She was willful, disrespectful. Your rights, Kaelin said, straightening, are forfeit. You are charged with the sustained abuse and torture of a dependent. You will remain here in silver until your trial, and then you will face the full penalty of our laws. As Kaelin turned to leave, Magnus spat out. She's weak. She'll never speak against me. She's too scared. Kaelin paused, a predator acknowledging prey. We shall see. Kaelin was as good as his word. Elara was given chambers in the family wing, sun-drenched, airy rooms that overlooked the castle gardens. Servants brought her clothes that fit, food so delicious it brought tears to her eyes. But freedom was a cage of a different kind. She jumped at sudden noises. She flinched when a servant moved too quickly. The kindness was confusing, terrifying in its unfamiliarity. Why was he doing this? Kings did not rescue broken orphans. There was always a price. Meanwhile, Kaelin grappled with his own turmoil. The image of Elara's scars was burned into his mind. His wolf was restless, obsessive. It fixated on her safety, on the scent of her fear slowly fading to something like cautious curiosity. He found excuses to walk past her rooms, to ask Anya for updates. It was more than pity. It was a pull, an unsettling need to be near, to ensure no further harm came to her. His beta, Rylan, noticed. "The girl troubles you, sire." "The injustice troubles me," Kaelin corrected, perhaps too quickly. "She is a subject who has failed. I am merely correcting that failure." Rylan said nothing, but his doubt was clear. One afternoon, Kaelin found Elara in the library, tentatively tracing the spines of books with a finger. She looked like a startled fawn when she saw him. "Do you like to read?" he asked. I can read numbers, ledgers. My father taught me," she said softly. "But stories, I never had many." Kaelin pulled a volume of ancient Lycan folklore from a shelf. "Then perhaps it is time you did. This one has no numbers, but it has maps of the old forests." He handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. A simple, fleeting contact, but a jolt like static passed between them. Elara's eyes widened. Kaelin felt his wolf stir, not in anger, but in a profound, deep-seated satisfaction. "Close," it purred. He stepped back, unnerved. "Enjoy it," he said, his voice strangely tight, and left before the confusion in her eyes could turn to fear. Comfort, however, was not safety. Stonehaven had its own shadows. Elara began to feel watched, not by the king or his guards, but by something else. A servant's whisper would cut off when she entered a room. A dark figure seemed to linger at the end of a corridor, vanishing when she turned. Once, a small, dead songbird was left on her windowsill, a cruel and puzzling omen. Paranoia, a familiar friend, began to creep back in. Was Magnus's influence greater than she knew? Did he have allies, even here? She mentioned none of this, fearing she would sound ungrateful or mad. Kaelin, preoccupied with the impending trial and his own confusing feelings, did not notice the new shadows under her eyes. He was, however, investigating Magnus more deeply. The merchant's ledgers, seized by royal decree, told a curious story. Large, regular payments to an unnamed recipient. Payments that spiked around the time of Elara's Parrots accident. Blackmail? Wondered Rylan. Or payment for a service, Kaelin mused, a cold suspicion forming. What if the ferry accident was not so accidental? What if Elara's suffering was not just cruelty, but a part of a larger plan? He needed to speak with her again, to ask harder questions about her parents' final days. But when he went to her chambers that evening, she was gone. The book of folklore lay open on a table by the window. A single frost-white winter rose, a flower that did not grow in the castle gardens, lay across its pages. Kaelin's heart turned to ice. His wolf erupted in a silent howl of alarm. Elara had not gone far. The feeling of being stalked within the castle walls had become unbearable. She sought air in the walled royal garden, a place she thought would be empty at dusk. Mist curled over the manicured hedges, and there she found him, not a shadow, but a man, a gardener she had seen once or twice, his face kind. He tipped his hat. "Good evening, miss."
Lovely rose, isn't it? He nodded to a nearby bush of the same frost-white roses. The king's mother planted them, rare, beautiful, but delicate. One must know just how to handle them, or their thorns and their scent can be quite overwhelming. He moved closer, his smile not reaching his eyes. A bit like certain secrets, yes? Best left buried, for everyone's safety. The threat was velvet-wrapped but clear. He knew something. About her parents? About Magnus? Before she could react, he pressed a small folded note into her numb hand and melted into the mist. The note contained only 3 words in a familiar, hated script. Silence is survival. It was Magnus's handwriting. He was communicating from his silver cell. He had people everywhere. The walls of Stonehaven were not a sanctuary, but a gilded prison with eyes. Overwhelmed, the world spun again. She stumbled back, the scent of the frost-white roses suddenly cloying and sickening. She fell to her knees among the thorns, the note crumpled in her fist as footsteps pounded on the gravel path behind her. It was Kaelin. He saw her kneeling, pale and shaking among the thorny roses, and was at her side in an instant. "Ilara, what happened? Are you hurt?" She couldn't speak. She just held out the crumpled note, her hand trembling violently. He took it, smoothed it, read the 3 words. His face, already etched with concern, transformed into a mask of cold, lethal fury. The growl that escaped him was pure predator. The gardener, the payments, the accident, it was all connected. This was not mere abuse, it was a conspiracy, and Ilara was the key they were trying to silence. He carefully helped her to the feet, ignoring the thorns that scratched his own hands. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and fierce, each word a pledge. "This ends tonight. No more shadows, no more threats. You are under my protection, not the castle's, mine. My personal vow, from king to subject, and from—" he hesitated, the truth of it crashing over him, "and from Kaelin to Ilara. My wolf has claimed you as its ward. It will allow no harm to come to you. Do you understand?" She looked up into his eyes, seeing not just royal authority, but a fierce personal commitment that shook her to her core. He was not just doing his duty. This was personal for him, too. Slowly, she nodded. "I understand." "Good. Then we hunt."
The castle went into quiet lockdown. The gardener was found, but he was no mere gardener. Under the silver gaze of the king, he broke. He was a hired hand, a message runner for a third party. He didn't know who, only that the money was good, and the instructions came via unsigned notes left in the city. The trail, however, led back to Magnus's finances. Kaelin and Rylan worked through the night, cross-referencing ledgers with castle staff records and reports from the city guards. A picture emerged. Magnus had been deeply in debt to a shadowy syndicate operating from a neighboring territory. The payments from his ledger were interest. The ferry accident had been investigated but closed quickly. The local official was now found to have gambling ties to the same syndicate. Ilara's parents had discovered Magnus's dealings and threatened to expose him, cutting him off from the family business. "They were murdered," Kaelin stated, the words hollow with rage. And Ilara was not just abused. She was a message, a living, breathing punishment, and a hostage to ensure Magnus's continued silence and payment. He stood, his decision made. "We move the trial up, tomorrow, and we bring all of this into the light." The trial was not held in a public court, but in the secure, stark chamber of the Royal Judgment Hall. Ilara was there, seated at Kaelin's insistence, wrapped in a cloak that felt like armor. Magnus, pale and thinner in his silver chains, glared at her with undisguised hatred. Kaelin presented the evidence not just of the abuse, but of the financial records, the gardener's confession, the bribed official. He wove the tale of murder, debt, and conspiracy. Magnus's arrogance crumbled into blustering denial, then into a seething, venomous silence.
"The law for abuse is imprisonment," Kalen pronounced, his voice echoing. "The law for conspiracy to murder a royal subject is death. You have committed both. Do you have anything to say?" Magnus looked at Alara, a final, twisted smirk on his face. "She's weak. She'll always be weak. You can dress her in silks, but she'll always be the cowering girl in the cellar, my masterpiece." That was it. The last thread of Kalen's control snapped, not into rage, but into a glacial, absolute certainty. "You are wrong," Kalen said, standing. He walked over to Alara and gently helped her to her feet. "You sought to break her. You failed. You see only the scars you made. I see the strength that survived them." He turned to the guards. "Magnus Vance, you are sentenced to lifelong imprisonment in the silver cells. May the memory of your failure be your only company." As Magnus was dragged away, screaming, Kalen did not watch. He looked only at Alara, seeing not a victim, but a survivor standing tall in the hall of her tormentor's judgment. The invisible bond between them pulled taut, a string of shared victory and unspoken understanding. In the days after the trial, a weight lifted from Stonehaven. The hidden enemy was named and chained. Alara truly breathed for the first time. She began to bloom. She offered to help Rylan with the castle's complex provisioning ledgers, and her natural gift for numbers and organization astonished him. She started a small project restoring a neglected herb garden with Anya, her hands learning to nurture life instead of fearing pain. Kalen watched her transformation with a wonder that deepened his own conflict. His feelings were no longer just protective. They were fond. They were more. He sought her company not out of duty, but desire. They walked the battlements, discussing everything from border politics to the legends in the book he'd given her. She challenged his views, made him laugh with a dry, unexpected wit. One evening, under a blanket of stars, she turned to him. "Why did you do it, Kalen? Really? You could have just sent me away with guards, with gold. Why all of this?" He was silent for a long moment, searching for the right words that weren't the overwhelming, terrifying truth. "When I caught you, it was as if my entire world sharpened into focus. For years, I have ruled, I have judged, I have fought. It was all a performance, a role. But in that moment, with you, it was real. The fury was real. The need to fix something, to protect something precious, was the most real thing I have felt in a decade." He met her gaze. "You were not a duty, Alara. You were a calling." Alara's past, however, was not done with her. On the anniversary of her parents' death, a sealed chest arrived at the castle, marked with the Vance family seal. It was from a lawkeeper in her old village, who had finally dared to send it after hearing of Magnus's downfall. Inside were not just the official deeds to the vineyard, but personal effects, her mother's journals, her father's maps of trade routes, and a single locked jewelry box. The key was long lost. The box was beautiful, ancient, and made of dark wood that hummed under her touch. It also made her deeply uneasy. That same night, Kalen's border scouts reported increased activity from the neighboring syndicate. They were restless, angry that their stream of payments from Magnus had dried up. Rumors spoke of them seeking the key to reclaim a lost investment. Kalen knew they weren't after a physical key. They were after Alara. She was the last living link to the wealth they believed was owed to them. The vineyard, her parents' hidden assets, perhaps even something in that box. The external threat now had a name and a direction. The sanctuary of Stonehaven was about to become a fortress under siege, and Alara, the heart of the storm. The syndicate moved faster than anticipated. They were not an army, but a network of thieves, assassins, and corrupt lichens from fringe packs. They struck at night, using stealth and insider knowledge, proof that Magnus had indeed planted more than one pawn. Alarms sounded. Stonehaven erupted into controlled chaos. Kalen, in full tactical command, was a sight to behold. Calm, ruthless, and everywhere at once. His primary order, Alara goes to Gavault. The vault was the deepest, most secure room in the mountain, designed to hold royal families during crises. As Rylan and 2 elite guards rushed her through smoke-filled corridors, a group of syndicate fighters cut them off. A brutal, close-quarters fight ensued. Alara, cornered, did not cower. As a snarling assailant lunged past a fallen guard towards her, she acted on pure instinct. She grabbed a fallen ceremonial dagger from a display case, a weapon she had admired days before for its craftsmanship. She didn't attack. She positioned herself, a desperate, defiant shield in front of a wounded guard. The move was so unexpected, so foolishly brave, it made the attacker hesitate for a fatal second. Rylan dispatched him. They reached the vault. As the massive stone door sealed behind her, the last thing she saw was Kalen at the far end of the hall, his clothes torn and silver eyes blazing with battle fury and relief, ensuring she was safe before turning back to the fight. The siege was broken by dawn. The Syndicate forces were captured or fled. Stonehaven stood secure, but the message was clear. The danger would persist as long as Alara was a target. In the quiet aftermath, in the sunlit library, Alara faced the wooden box. Kalen, a fresh cut on his cheekbone, sat beside her. "They seek a key," she whispered, "but the key is lost." Kalen looked at the box, then at her. Perhaps not. Lycan lore speaks of bloodlocks, locks that open not with metal, but with legacy, with truth. He placed his hand over hers on the box. Your strength survived Magnus. Your courage survived the siege. Perhaps the final lock is your own acceptance of who you are now, not a victim, but a survivor, a woman from Stonehaven. He was offering her a place, a true home, not as a ward, but as what? His gaze held the unspoken question, the promise that had grown between them. Taking a steadying breath, Alara made a decision. She pricked her finger with the tip of the ceremonial dagger she had kept. A single drop of blood fell on the box's lock. There was a soft, resonant click. The lid sprang open. Inside, there were no jewels or gold. There was a deed granting the sovereign right of the vineyard to the ruling monarch of the territory, and a letter from her father. It read, "To our daughter, or to the king who protects her."
This land is not wealth. It is a covenant. It holds a sacred spring, waters that heal Lycan wounds. We died to protect this secret from those who would misuse it. Protect it, or if you are the king, protect her. She is the true key. Alara looked from the letter to Kalen, understanding dawning. Magnus and the Syndicate hadn't just wanted money, they had wanted a weapon, and her parents had died to hide it. She was not a pawn, she was a guardian. Kalen took the letter, his expression one of awe and solemnity. They didn't just leave you an inheritance, Alara. They left you a purpose, a legacy that only you, with your strength and heart, could fulfill. He knelt before her, not as a king to a subject, but as a man to his equal. Alara Vance, you have saved my guards, uncovered an ancient secret, and stood defiant in the face of every shadow. My wolf recognized your strength from the beginning. I was slow to understand, but I do now. You are not just under my protection. You are my partner, my destined equal. Will you stay? Will you rule by my side, not as a queen in a crown, but as the guardian of the spring and the hearts of this pack? Alara looked at the man who had caught her, fought for her, and seen her true self when she could not. She saw her future not in a distant vineyard, but here, in this stone fortress, with this fierce, loyal man. Her home was not a place, but a person, a choice. "Yes, Kalen," she said, her voice clear and strong, free of fear for the first time. "I choose to stay. I choose this life. I choose you." And in the quiet library, with the morning sun washing over them and the ancient secret safe in their hands, a new covenant was born, not from a fainting spell, but from survived storms, uncovered truths, and a choice made freely. The strongest foundation of all.